The docking clamps engaged with a soft thud, reverberating through the metal hull of Tom's cargo ship, the Starbound. After a grueling 2-week haul through the Delta Sector, the fringes of human-controlled space welcomed him with the familiar buzz of commerce and the tang of ionized air. The spaceport was a hive of activity, a melting pot where hundreds of species mingled. Tom stepped out of his cockpit, stretching his legs, ready to oversee the unloading process. As he descended the gangplank, his first mate, a burly man named Rick, joined him. "Smooth landing, Captain," Rick commented, clapping Tom on the shoulder. "Thanks, Rick. Let's get the manifest checked off. I want to be out of here by 0800 tomorrow," Tom replied, handing over a digital tablet. The two men worked in tandem, checking the cargo against their list: medical supplies, machine parts, synthetic proteins. Everything seemed in order until they reached the last container, a large crate supposedly full of agricultural tools. The seal was broken. "Fancy a look inside?" Rick asked, raising an eyebrow. Tom nodded, and together they pried the container open. Inside, amid the expected spades and rakes, was an unexpected stowaway. A figure stirred among the shadows, her slender form draped in a shimmering, translucent cloak. She stepped forward, revealing herself to be an alien of remarkable beauty, with luminescent skin and eyes like molten silver. "Please don't be alarmed," she said in a voice that carried the melody of wind chimes. Rick took a step back, hand on his stun baton, but Tom stayed his hand with a gesture. "Who are you? How did you get on my ship?" "My name is Lyra. I was the princess of my planet, Otharia. I had to escape. I need your help." Tom and Rick exchanged glances. Alien royalty was the last thing they expected to find hidden among their cargo. "Escape? From what?" Tom asked, skepticism threading his voice. "Conspirators who wish to see my family dethroned. They killed my protector and forced me to flee. Your ship was my only chance." Lyra's voice wavered, but her gaze was steady, pleading. Rick looked uneasy. "Captain, this sounds like trouble. The kind we should avoid." Tom considered his options. Helping Lyra could embroil them in political intrigue they knew nothing about. But there was something in her earnest plea that tugged at him. "If we let you stay, we're taking a risk. What's in it for us?" Tom asked, his tone pragmatic yet not unkind. Lyra stepped forward, her presence commanding despite her delicate frame. "I have knowledge of technologies and treasures of my world, things that would fetch a high price here or anywhere. I can also offer you my gratitude," she added, her eyes locking onto Tom's with an intensity that bordered on desperation. Tom nodded slowly. "All right, Lyra. We'll get you to a safe place, but we do this my way." "Understood?" "Understood, and thank you," she replied, relief washing over her features. Rick sighed, clearly still unsure, but he trusted Tom's judgment. "All right then, let's figure out where to hide you until we can sort this mess out." As Rick and Lyra worked to reseal the crate discreetly, Tom logged into his console to chart a course that would avoid the major trade routes. As he plotted their path, he couldn't help but feel that their journey had just taken an unexpected turn, one that might change their lives forever. Tom navigated the Starbound into the quieter lanes of space traffic, using the less traveled routes to avoid any potential pursuers. The ship's engines hummed a steady beat, a comforting sound in the vast silence of the cosmos. Inside his cabin, Tom and Lyra sat across from each other, a digital map of the galaxy spread out between them. "So, where do you think we should head?" Tom asked, tapping on the screen to bring up the political affiliations of nearby systems. Lyra leaned in, her finger tracing a line towards a small, unassuming sector. "Here, the Helix Nebula. It's neutral territory and mostly uninhabited. We could find refuge on one of the planets, or at least lay low until we figure out a more permanent solution." Tom nodded, considering her suggestion. "Neutral ground is good, keeps us off the radar." "How do you know about this place?" "My tutor was a navigator. He loved talking about the less-known corners of the galaxy," she replied with a faint smile. Their planning was interrupted by a buzz at the door. Tom pressed the release, and Rick stepped in, a look of concern etched across his face. "Captain, we've got a slight problem with the engine's coolant system. Nothing serious, but it needs fixing or it'll slow us down, Rick reported, crossing his arms. Can you handle it? Tom asked, standing up. Sure, but I could use an extra pair of hands. Maybe teach our royal guest here a bit about ship maintenance? Rick suggested, with a slight chuckle. Lyra stood eagerly. I would like that. It's better than sitting around, feeling helpless. Tom smiled. All right, let's get to it. Lyra, welcome to the Grease Monkey Club. The three of them made their way down to the engine room, where the air was thick with the scent of oil and metal. Rick led them to a large, cylindrical unit with panels removed, exposing a tangle of wires and conduits. Here's the problem. The coolant isn't circulating properly because of a blockage in the filter. We need to clear that out and check the connections, Rick explained, handing Lyra a flashlight. Lyra took the flashlight, shining it into the machine's innards while Tom and Rick unscrewed the access panel. Despite her initial hesitation, she quickly got into the work, passing tools and holding lights exactly where needed. You're a natural at this, Tom noted, smiling as he watched her hand him a wrench. It's fascinating, Lyra responded, her voice full of genuine interest. Everything here is so different from what I'm used to, but it's exhilarating to learn. As they worked, Tom found himself increasingly impressed, not only with Lyra's quick learning, but also with her willingness to dive into manual labor, something he suspected she hadn't had to do much of as a princess. With the filter cleared and the system checked, the coolant began to circulate properly again. Rick wiped his hands on a rag, grinning. They're like new. Good work, team. Lyra beamed, a streak of grease under one eye. Thank you, both of you. I feel more useful now. As you should, Tom said as they exited the engine room. You're not just a passenger, Lyra. You're part of the crew now. Back in the navigation room, Tom updated their course to the Helix Nebula. With the ship running smoothly and their new course plotted, a sense of camaraderie settled among them. Let's hope our journey is as smooth as today's repairs, Rick said, clapping Tom on the back. Tom nodded, his gaze fixed on the star map. We're in uncharted waters now, in more ways than one. But with a bit of luck, we'll get through this together. As the Starbound continued its journey through the stars, the lines between captain, crew, and stowaway princess blurred, bound together by a shared goal and the vast, unyielding universe that lay before them. Inside the cramped yet cozy confines of the Starbound's cockpit, Tom and Lyra sat before a constellation of blinking controls and holographic displays. Outside, the vast tapestry of space stretched endlessly, dotted with the glow of distant stars. Lyra leaned closer to one of the displays, her finger hovering over a series of celestial coordinates. This area here, she pointed, is known for its asteroid fields rich in iridium. We could possibly harvest some while we're in the vicinity. It would be valuable for trading. Tom nodded, impressed by her knowledge. That's a great idea, Lyra. We could use the extra credits. But we'll need to be careful. Navigating asteroid fields can be tricky. Perhaps I could help with that, Lyra offered. My training included astrogation. I'm familiar with predictive algorithms for plotting safe paths through such areas. That would be very helpful, Tom said, smiling warmly at her. He turned to his left where his second-in-command, a rugged man named Harris, was monitoring the fuel levels. Harris, think you can handle a detour through an asteroid field? Harris, who had been listening intently, gave a nod. Sure thing, Captain. With the princess's help, I'm sure we can make it through without a scratch. The decision made, Tom set about adjusting their course, while Lyra and Harris worked together to input the necessary calculations. The atmosphere was a mix of concentration and excitement as they embraced the challenge. Meanwhile, Rick had joined them, curious about the new task. Asteroid mining? Huh? Never thought I'd see the day we'd be prospecting in space. Lyra laughed softly. There's a first time for everything, right? As the Starbound approached the asteroid field, the lights of the cockpit dimmed, enhancing the view of space ahead. Tom stood by the main window, hands clasped behind his back, watching the asteroids drift lazily around them. It's beautiful, isn't it? Lyra remarked, joining him at the window. It is, Tom agreed. Reminds you how small we really are. Their moment of reflection was short-lived as Harris called them back to action. We're approaching the densest part of the field. Lyra, I need your eyes here. Lyra hurried over to assist, her gaze fixed on the readouts. Adjust heading by 2.3 degrees starboard. That should keep us clear of the larger masses. Tom followed her instructions, maneuvering the ship with practiced ease. The starbound weaved through the asteroids, a testament to the crew's teamwork and Lyra's expertise. After they cleared the field, Rick whistled appreciatively. Nice flying, Captain, and nice guiding, Princess. Lyra smiled, visibly pleased with their success. Thank you, Rick. It feels good to contribute. With skills like yours, you're more than just a refugee. You're a vital part of this crew, Harris added, clapping her on the shoulder. As the tension of the moment eased, Tom suggested they gather in the common area to celebrate their small victory. Over a meal of synthesized protein and fresh vegetables from the hydroponics lab, the crew shared stories of their past adventures in space. Tom listened as Lyra recounted tales of Otharia, her homeworld, describing the floating gardens and crystal lakes. Her voice, filled with a mixture of nostalgia and sorrow, drew the men in, weaving a picture of a world they could only imagine. And what about you, Captain? What's your story? Lyra finally asked, turning the focus to Tom. Tom paused, then smiled. Mine is a tale of endless skies and the pursuit of freedom. Every star a story, every planet a chapter. The crew listened, captivated by his words, feeling the bonds of their unexpected fellowship strengthen. As the evening wore on, they realized that despite the vastness of space separating them from everything they knew, they had found a new kind of home amongst the stars and amongst each other. In the subdued glow of the Starbound's navigation room, Tom and Harris reviewed their course adjustments after successfully navigating the asteroid field. The air was thick with the scent of recycled oxygen, mixed with a hint of coffee from the adjacent galley where Rick was brewing a fresh pot. Looks like we're back on track, Tom said, his eyes scanning the star map displayed on the main screen. But we'll need to keep a close watch. That detour took more out of our fuel reserves than I liked. Harris nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. I'll recalibrate the energy consumption levels. Maybe we can squeeze out some extra efficiency from the propulsion systems. Good idea, Tom replied. He turned as Rick entered the room, 2 steaming mugs in his hands. Thought you guys could use a pick-me-up, Rick said, handing a mug to each of them. Thanks, Tom said, taking a grateful sip. We're just going over the new route. Want to take a look? Rick set his own mug down and leaned over the console. What's our next major waypoint? We're heading towards the Luton cluster. There's a refueling outpost on the edge. Should be able to restock and maybe lay low for a bit, Tom explained, pointing to a blinking dot on the map. Harris looked up from his calculations. It's a popular spot for traders and miners. We might pick up some gossip, too. Information could be as valuable as fuel right now. As they discussed their plans, Lyra entered the room. I heard the engines change pitch. Are we on a new heading? We are, Tom confirmed, taking a slight detour to refuel and gather intel. How are you holding up? Lyra smiled slightly. Well, I'm learning a lot about spaceship maintenance and navigation. It's more hands-on than my usual royal duties. Speaking of which, maybe you can help me with the energy readings, Harris suggested, gesturing towards another console. I'll show you what to look for. Lyra joined Harris at his station, eager to learn. Tom watched them for a moment, pleased to see how well Lyra was integrating into the crew. Hey, Tom, Rick said quietly, drawing him aside. You think it's wise getting her so involved? What if we get into trouble because of her? Tom considered his words. I understand the risk, but she's already in this deep. Keeping her in the dark won't protect us. Besides, she's proving her worth. Rick nodded, still unconvinced but trusting Tom's judgment. All right, just be careful, yeah? I will, Tom assured him. Over the next few hours, the crew worked closely together, fine-tuning their ship systems and preparing for the challenges ahead. Lyra's quick understanding of the ship's technology impressed everyone, bridging the gap between her world and theirs. As they approached the Luton cluster, the Starbound received a communication hail from the outpost. Tom answered, his voice steady. This is Captain Tom Adler of the Starbound, requesting permission to dock for refueling and supplies. A crackly voice responded, acknowledged Starbound. You're cleared for docking at Bay 4. Welcome to the Luton Outpost. The outpost was a sprawling complex of docks, markets, and bars, a bustling hub for those who thrived on the edge of civilized space. As the Starbound settled into its assigned dock, the crew prepared to disembark. "Let's keep a low profile while we're here," Tom instructed. "Harris, you and I will handle the refueling and supplies. Rick, you and Lyra see if you can dig up any useful info without drawing too much attention." "Got it, Captain," Rick responded, clapping Lyra on the shoulder. "Let's make this a quick stop." With each member of the crew clear on their tasks, they stepped off the ship, ready to face whatever the Luton Outpost had in store for them. Their unity and shared purpose gave them confidence, but the weight of their secrets kept them cautious. Each step they took was measured, every conversation calculated. The Starbound might have been their vessel, but their true journey was navigating the precarious paths of trust and survival. The Luton Outpost buzzed with the chaotic energy typical of a frontier trading hub. Neon lights flickered in syncopation with the polyrhythmic hums of docked ships and the cacophonous blend of alien dialects. Tom and Harris navigated through the crowded lanes of the market, their eyes alert. "We need to make this quick. Fuel, supplies, and any intel on movements that might concern us," Tom muttered to Harris as they approached a vendor selling high-grade fuel cells. Harris nodded, eyeing the merchant skeptically. "Let's also grab some spare parts for the secondary airlock. It's been sticking." At the fuel stall, Tom engaged the vendor, a grizzled human with a cybernetic eye. "We'll take 3 of your best cells. And have you heard any rumors about Imperial patrols in the sector?" The vendor grunted, swapping out fuel cells. "Imperials? Always sniffing around. Heard they might be tightening security. Something about a royal runaway stirring the pot." Tom exchanged a glance with Harris. This was too close to their own situation for comfort. "Thanks for the tip," Tom said, handing over credits. Meanwhile, Rick and Lyra mingled in the less crowded parts of the outpost. Rick was visibly tense, his gaze darting around as he led Lyra through shadowy corridors. "Remember, we're just here for information. No names, and keep your hood up," Rick instructed as they paused near a busy tavern. Lyra nodded, her face obscured by the hood of her cloak. Inside the tavern, they found a quiet corner. Rick ordered 2 drinks and turned to Lyra. "Let's split up. Blend in. Listen for anything about the Otharian royal family or unusual movements in the sector." Lyra moved to the bar, her posture relaxed but alert. She caught snippets of conversations, her ears tuning into the varied accents and languages. A burly trader next to her complained loudly to his companion. "The Imperials are locking down the trade routes. It's that damned royal scandal. Got everyone jumpy." Lyra sipped her drink, her mind racing. The news was unsettling, suggesting their presence might already be influencing Imperial activities. Back at the market, Tom and Harris completed their transactions and decided to regroup with Rick and Lyra at the tavern. As they entered, they spotted Lyra speaking with an elderly alien, her expression earnest. Tom approached cautiously, overhearing part of their conversation. "And you're sure about this?" Lyra was asking. The alien nodded, his voice a raspy whisper. "Yes, the princess is considered a significant threat. They're increasing patrols looking for her." Tom intervened then, placing a hand on Lyra's shoulder. "Time to go." They gathered outside, under the dim light of the outpost's moons. Lyra looked shaken, but her voice was steady. "The Imperials are actively searching for me. We need to be more careful than ever." "We will be," Tom assured her. "Let's get back to the ship. We've got what we came for, and it's time we disappear again." As they walked back to the Starbound, the weight of their situation settled over the group like a shroud. Rick glanced over at Lyra, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by a frown. "You did good in there, but we're in deeper now." Lyra met his gaze, her own reflecting a mixture of fear and determination. "I won't let my problems endanger you all. If it comes to it, I'll leave." "No one's abandoning anyone," Tom interjected firmly. "We stick together. That's how we've gotten this far, and it's how we'll keep going." Back aboard the ship, the atmosphere was tense but resolute as they prepared to leave the outpost behind. The Starbound lifted off, leaving the flickering lights of Luton fading into the darkness of space, a stark reminder of the perilous path they had chosen. As they set course for the next waypoint, each member of the crew felt the isolation of space a little more acutely, united by their shared plight and a common goal that seemed increasingly treacherous. The Starbound sliced through the dark vacuum, a silent sentinel adrift among the stars. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted subtly, but significantly. After the close call at the Luton outpost, a sense of urgency pervaded the air. The crew, once relaxed and jovial, now worked with a quiet focus, each member acutely aware of the stakes. In the ship's common area, Tom, Harris, and Rick gathered around a makeshift table cluttered with star charts and digital devices. They were plotting their next move, a task made more complex by the latest developments. "We need a safer route," Tom stated, his finger tracing a line across a holographic map of adjacent sectors. Somewhere off the Imperial radar, Harris leaned in, adjusting the projection to display less traveled trade lanes. "What about here, through the Caldra Nebula? It's not exactly a picnic. Visibility is poor, and the sensors get all choppy, but it might be perfect for laying low." Rick rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I don't like it. Too risky with the nebula's magnetic storms. If our sensors go down, we're flying blind. That might actually work in our favor," Tom countered. "Harder for anyone to track us." As they debated their course, Lyra entered quietly, sensing the tension. She hesitated at the door, her expression one of determination mixed with unease. "Can I join you?" she asked softly. Tom nodded, gesturing to an empty seat. "Of course. We're trying to figure out our next step." Lyra sat, pulling the chair close to the table. "I want to help. Maybe there's something in my experience or knowledge from Otharia that could be useful." Rick looked at her, a spark of appreciation in his eyes. "Actually, that might not be a bad idea. Anything in your bag of royal tricks that might help us navigate through a nebula." Lyra thought for a moment. Then her eyes lit up. The royal fleet often used ion deflectors to minimize sensor interference in difficult conditions. If we could rig something similar, it might help stabilize the ship's readings. Harris, intrigued, leaned forward. "Ion deflectors? We might just have the parts to put something like that together. What do you think, Captain?" Tom smiled, impressed by her suggestion. "Let's give it a try. Anything that gives us an edge." The men moved to gather the necessary components, while Lyra explained the principles behind the technology used in Otharian ships. Together, they worked through the night, retrofitting the Starbound with a makeshift ion deflector. As they worked, the barriers between them, once marked by rank and origin, seemed to dissolve, replaced by camaraderie and a shared purpose. Tom noticed the change, feeling a swell of pride for his crew and their alien ally. After hours of labor, the device was installed. Exhausted but satisfied, the group sat back, admiring their handiwork. Rick, wiping grease from his hands, grinned at Lyra. "Looks like you're more than just royalty. You're one of us now." Lyra returned the smile, her cheeks flushed with exertion and a bit of pride. "I'm glad to be useful, and I'm learning a lot about ships and about friendship." Tom stood, stretching his back. "Well, it's late. Let's test this thing tomorrow." "Good work, everyone." They dispersed to their quarters, the ship quieter now, the only sound the low hum of the engine and the soft buzz of the new deflector. In the solitude of his cabin, Tom pondered the unexpected journey, from simple cargo runs to harboring a fugitive princess and retrofitting his ship based on alien technology. He felt a twinge of anxiety about what lay ahead, but also a deep, unshakable confidence in his crew. The next morning, as the Starbound approached the edge of the Caldra Nebula, they activated the ion deflector. The ship trembled slightly as it entered the cloud of cosmic dust and charged particles, but the deflector held, the sensors remained clear, and their course stayed true. "Looks like it's working," Harris called out from his station, a note of relief in his voice. Rick clapped Lyra on the back. "Nice job, Princess." Lyra watched the nebula swirl around them, a smile playing on her lips. "We make a good team, don't we?" "We do," Tom agreed, watching the nebula's colors dance across her face. "We really do." As the Starbound emerged from the Caldra Nebula, a sense of relief washed over the crew. Their makeshift ion deflector had held up against the nebula's tumultuous environment, a testament to their ingenuity and teamwork. The common area was abuzz with a quiet celebration, the crew enjoying a rare moment of calm. Tom, sipping his coffee, leaned back against the console. That went smoother than I expected. Good call on the deflector. Lyra, sitting across from him with a warm mug in her hands, smiled. I'm just glad I could help. It feels good to contribute. Rick, sprawled in a chair nearby, chuckled. You're part of this crew now, no doubt about it. What's the plan, Captain? Do we keep heading deeper into uncharted territory? Tom placed his mug down, his expression turning serious. We've avoided patrols so far, but we can't keep running forever. We need a long-term solution. Harris, who had been checking the navigation data, turned to join the conversation. We could seek asylum in a neutral system. I know a few places where we might blend in without drawing attention. That could work, Tom mused. But we need to be strategic about it. Choosing the right place is critical. We don't want to end up in a system that's secretly aligned with the Imperials. The conversation was interrupted by a sudden beep from the communication console. Tom stood to answer it, his brow furrowed. This is the Starbound. Identify yourself. The voice that came through was distorted, cautious. This is Captain Drexel of the freighter Hollow Moon. We're in need of assistance. Our navigation systems are down, and we're drifting. Tom glanced at his crew, weighing his options. Helping another ship could expose them, but leaving them could mean death for its crew. What's your location? We're near the edge of the Ferris Belt, the voice replied, a note of desperation creeping in. That's not far from here, Harris pointed out, looking at Tom. Tom made a quick decision. We're on our way. Hang tight, Hollow Moon. The Starbound changed course, heading towards the coordinates provided. The crew prepared to assist, their own concerns momentarily set aside. As they approached the drifting freighter, Lyra peered out the viewport. There it is. It looks bad. Tom nodded, his gaze fixed on the damaged vessel. Rick prepped the docking clamps. Harris, you and I will board. Lyra, you stay here and monitor our systems. The docking process was smooth despite the circumstances. Tom and Harris entered the Hollow Moon, finding its crew in a state of mild panic. Thank you for coming, Captain Drexel greeted them, a grizzled veteran of space. We're lucky you were close by. Tom shook his hand, his eyes scanning the ship's interior. Let's see what we can do about your NAV systems. Working together, Tom and Harris quickly diagnosed the problem. A fried guidance chip, likely from a micrometeorite. Tom radioed Rick. We need a spare guidance chip. Think we have one on board. Should have one in the back storage. I'll bring it over, Rick responded, his voice crackling through the comms. Minutes later, Rick arrived with the necessary part. The teams worked in tandem to replace the damaged chip. As they worked, Captain Drexel explained their predicament. We were hauling ore from the mines in the outer sectors when it hit us. Didn't even see it coming. Tom nodded, understanding the perils all too well. You're lucky it was just the NAV chip. With the new chip installed, the Hollow Moon systems hummed back to life. Captain Drexel was profoundly grateful. I owe you. Anything you need, you just ask. Tom smiled, clasping his hand. Just keep an ear out for us. Information can be as valuable as credits. Will do, Drexel promised as the crew said their goodbyes. Back on the Starbound, the mood was lifted by their successful rescue. Feels good to help, Harris commented as they resumed their course. Tom agreed, feeling a mix of pride and apprehension. It does, but let's not forget why we're out here. We still need to find a safe haven. As the Starbound sailed on, the galaxy seemed a little less hostile, their path forward a little clearer, with new allies possibly lurking in the stars. The bridge of the Starbound was bathed in the soft light of distant suns shining through its viewport. Tom stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the star map projected in front of him. The crew had gathered around, a palpable sense of anticipation in the air. We've come a long way, Tom began, his voice steady. And thanks to some quick thinking and a few new friends, we've managed to stay one step ahead of trouble. But we need to decide on our next move. Harris, leaning against the navigation console, nodded. The safe havens we've discussed are all viable, but each has its risks and advantages. We could try for the Theta system. It's remote, lightly patrolled, and has a strong, independent streak. Rick chimed in, his arms crossed. Thetis is good, but it's also a haven for smugglers and other outlaws. We might be jumping from the frying pan into the fire. Lyra listened intently, her expression thoughtful. What about the Eridani sector? It's under the jurisdiction of the Coalition of Free Systems. They're known for their neutrality and might offer asylum, especially if they learn of my situation. Tom considered her suggestion. Eridani could work. It's farther than Thetis, but might provide a more stable long-term solution. The crew weighed the options, discussing potential strategies and contingencies. Finally, Tom made a decision. Let's set a course for Eridani. We'll need to be cautious and keep a low profile until we can secure asylum. With a new destination set, the crew sprang into action, each member performing their duties with a renewed sense of purpose. Harris updated their route, Rick checked the engines, and Lyra helped by monitoring communication channels for any sign of Imperial activity. As they traveled, the days blended into one another, each marked by briefings, system checks, and shared meals in the common area. The crew's camaraderie deepened, their bonds forged in the crucible of shared adversity. One evening, as they neared the Eridani sector, the crew gathered in the common area, a makeshift celebration underway. Tom raised his glass, signaling for quiet. To new beginnings and safe harbors, he toasted, his eyes sweeping over his crew. New beginnings, they echoed, clinking glasses. Lyra smiled, her eyes meeting Tom's. I never imagined when I stowed away on your ship that I'd find such friendship. No matter what happens in Eridani, I am grateful to all of you. Tom nodded, his voice sincere. We're glad you're here, Lyra. You're part of this crew, and we stick together. The celebration continued into the night, but eventually, the crew retired to their quarters, leaving Tom and Lyra alone, looking out at the stars. Lyra turned to Tom. Do you think they'll accept us in Eridani? Tom looked thoughtful, his gaze lost in the starlit distance. I think they will. We have a strong case, and we've proven we can handle ourselves. But no matter what, we'll face it together. Lyra nodded, a gentle smile curving her lips. Together, the next morning, as the Starbound approached the Eridani sector, the mood was tense but hopeful. They were contacted by the Coalition's border control as they entered the sector. This is the Coalition border control. State your business, a crisp voice came over the comm. Tom responded, his voice calm. This is Captain Tom Adler of the Starbound. We seek asylum under the protection of the Coalition for ourselves and our crew member from Otharia. We request permission to enter and present our case. There was a pause. Then the voice returned. Proceed to the designated coordinates. You will be escorted to the Coalition Assembly Station. Your case will be heard. As the Starbound followed the instructions, escorted by two sleek Coalition ships, the crew prepared to make their case. Whatever the outcome, they knew they had each other, and sometimes, in the vast and often unforgiving expanse of space, that was enough.